This week's episode is brought to you in partnership with Zero Procure. The guys at Zero Procure have walked a mile in the shoes of many of our listeners from the world of hospitality. In fact, they have over 70 years of collective experience of working in the hospitality industry, and that'll probably be me getting into trouble for making them feel old. I really recommend speaking to them to ensure you're working with the right suppliers at the right price. There's zero cost involved. Just click on their link in the show notes or visit their site at zeroprocure.com/podcast. Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Benoit Blin, chef pâtissier at Le Manoir aux Quatre Saisons and TV judge on Bake Off the Professionals. Coming up on today's show, Benoit finds himself in a pastry nightmare.
I realized I didn't have the right ingredients, I didn't have the right equipment, I didn't have the right recipe with me.
Phil alienates Benoit in one sentence.
When it comes to matters of pastry, I can't do it.
And Benoit tells us what not to do if you ever get your shot on Bake Off the Professionals.
When Cherish and I see things like that, we're boiling like the kettle.
All that and so much more as we chat through Benoit's awesome story and journey to date. Chatting to Benoit was a total joy from start to finish. Not only has he got a cracking career story to share, but there's some amazing lessons throughout, especially if you're looking to learn ways to get the most out of your own career, and some of them might even surprise you. A huge thank you to Benoit for giving us his time. As always, if you have the time, please head over to your podcast app of choice and leave us a review. It really does make a huge difference. Enjoy. And a huge Hospitality Meets welcome to Benoit Blin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
How are you?
Glad to be here, but I'm very good. Very happy. I've got my mug of coffee latte next to me. I'm happy.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, well, I've come to Le Manoir to talk to you today because, why not? And also beautiful weather outside for Le Manoir. Like it's the perfect Christmas scene, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. The touch of frost is there this morning. -6 on the road. And it's nippy, to say the least.
Nippy, indeed. I think I left the house, it was -5 this morning.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they don't send the gritter down my road, so you got to drive very carefully.
Yeah, but it's everywhere around here, actually. We are in the countryside, so, it's a little bit icy.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful. You look everywhere, it's all white. It's beautiful just before Christmas. It's lovely.
Yeah, I can't imagine a better place to be at Christmas, to be honest. All the decorations up. I was talking to one of your colleagues on the way in there as well about how you get choirs in to sing carols and stuff, and it's just looking...
Yeah, we've got the Christmas carols at the minute. Every December, the first couple of weeks of December, we've got a few nights where we've got the choirs in the church next to Le Manoir. And we've got 180 of our guests coming to listen to it and then come for a lovely dinner after that. So keeps us busy and keeps us in the mood.
Yeah.
Until Christmas, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for the few people out there who might not know who you are, just tell us who you are and what it is that you do.
Well, I'm Benoit Blin. I'm the chef pâtissier, or head pastry chef, as you will say in English, of Le Manoir aux Quatre Saisons. And I've been the chef pâtissier there for the past 28 years, working very closely with Raymond Blanc. And yes, I'm looking after a team of 14 chefs, and we do everything on the sweet side of Le Manoir, from the bread to the breakfast items, viennoiseries, chocolate, name it, plated dessert, and so on and so forth. Everything is made in-house. And There we go. That's a short story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that sounds like you're not busy at all then. There's not a lot to do.
No, there's not a lot. 14 chefs flat out.
Wow.
Basically, the place barely shouts. In fact, the place never shuts down, really, other than a week in January. So you have to cover every single day, every single shift. So therefore, you need a big team to cover everything and do the work.
Yeah, 14. God.
Yep.
Well, we'll get onto that because that's obviously makes up part of your journey. But I really want to talk to you today about how you got into hospitality in the first place and just kind of talk us through your journey. So how did it happen all the way back, however many years ago it was? I'll let you be the judge whether you tell the world how long ago it was.
Yeah, I always compare myself with Obelix in some ways, the little French character, with cartoons, because I fall into the pot when I was little. And it is virtually true. I lived in a street in France, in Normandy, in the small town of Villedieu-les-Poêles. And I had two bakers on either side of the street. And both of them had sons, which are the same age as me. So naturally, I was playing already in their kitchens. We called them fournil at the time. They were bakers. And I grew up with the scent of flour and freshly baked goods. And also, I had a very sweet tooth since I was little, and I always loved to hang around these places around 4 o'clock to try to have the chance of a little pain au chocolat or a croissant, which could have been hanging around, because I loved it. And so from 7, 8 years old, I was already mixing up in this environment, and I love food, and my phone is just ringing. That's not great, is
That's
it?
all right. Well, that'll make the intro. I do a comedy intro if you haven't listened to any before. So
well, you wanted something funny, there it comes. Yes, so I got into the mix of the baking world, and also one of my best friends' parents used to run the best hotel in town, l'Hôtel Saint-Pierre, and I used to play in those vast banquet rooms, you know, and you had the whole room for yourself with your friend, and the dad was the chef in the kitchen, and the mom was looking after the hotel. So though my parents in the background were artisans, but they were like more painters and decorators, so they were refurbishing houses and things like that. The world of food is something I've discovered with my friends, and definitely something I loved. On the side of that, my mom had to cook on a regular basis for my father's team. So sometimes you could be 16 at lunch that she had to kind of deal with. So the cooking element never scared me in some ways. I've always been embracing it, and I loved especially the sweet side of it. So that's why I became a pastry chef, I guess.
And then somebody told you you could make a living out of something that you love.
Well, somebody said you never worked a day in your life if you do something you love. There are days I love it more than others, to be honest about it, like every passion in life. But the truth is I consider myself very lucky, and that's why I tell my children as well, find something you love doing. Don't force yourself doing something you don't, because you're wasting your time. But if you do, then give everything you've got. And that's lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened next then? How you got into the industry, but how did the journey take off?
Well, the journey take off because actually one of the bakers in my street took me on an apprenticeship. I was 14, just above 14 at the time. So fairly young. I wasn't an adult. I was a kid still, 14 years old. And bless him, my dad had to drive me at 4 o'clock in the morning to get to my first shifts. And until I got a moped eventually. And then I did the journey myself. But yes, 14 years old, and started as a baker first for 2 years because I'd been very strongly influenced by my parents, bless them. And they kind of... They understood the artisan world, but obviously from a different side. Yeah. And they always thought, you know, Benoit, if you want to be a good pastry chef, you can have to know how to do the bread as well, because if one day you've got your own business, only one side of it might just be difficult. And in France, a lot of good, successful business sells bread as well as patisserie. So I wanted to know everything and then make my choices after, if I had to. And actually, that has been always my motto of preparing myself for the world. If you aim high, you can always come back down and find what you like to do and adjust to the need of your job in some ways. So I always said, I'm going to do 2 years apprenticeship in a bakery, which I started. And 14 years old, there I was earning something less than £70 a month. Right. My first wage in some ways.
What I really love about that, though, is that you had the support of your family very early, like to get up in the morning and drive you at 4 o'clock in the morning to a shift. That's a dedicated parent for sure. Yeah. Do you think that that's different in France than it is to the UK? This is a subject that intrigues me greatly because we always talk about how hospitality is seen in Europe as a proper professional career. Whereas in the UK, it's maybe not necessarily got that gravitas in amongst some parents out there, which is what we're trying to change. But is that a fair comment, do you think, or do you see it differently?
Well, I've been here only 28 years, so I didn't grow. I didn't grow in this country, so I just came as a guest only later on in life. But from what I see, parents here are as dedicated as anybody else around the world. I believe they still want the best for their children. They still fight for the best schools. They try to even move around the place to try to make sure they've got a good catching school for their kids. So I don't think the dedication of the parents is to be put in doubt. What is perhaps hopefully changing now is the perception of what the hospitality industry is all about. Yeah. I think I remember kind of picking up the difference. In France, it's a job. It's a career. It's something you see yourself doing respectably and be very proud of it. When perhaps in the UK, it's something which has started to change recently. Yeah. When before being a waiter, you know, serving people at the table was seen as a casual job. Perhaps it still is, but not as something you can do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You see, when in fact, there is very great career path to be taken when you are a head waiter or a sommelier, and there is more than just putting a plate on the table and a smile to a guest in that side of the job. And for the pastry chef, well, it's the truth as well, because actually, 28 years ago, a great chef said pastry in England or in the UK is dead. And I've never believed this, because now, out of 14 people in my team, I'm the only Frenchman, and everybody else pretty much, or 3/4 of them are from UK.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Yes, or British nationality. So that means there is now an understanding that if you like baking, if you like making patisserie, if you like the sweet side of cooking, you can choose making this and make a career out of it here in the UK. It's a growing element of it. Restaurant and hotel start to appreciate that there is a different skill set between chefs and pastry chefs, as well as there is a different skill set from a sommelier to a waiter or head waiter. So we're starting to see different niche, different speciality within the industry, which now attract youngsters and less young people for perhaps doing this as a passion.
Yeah.
You know, and you got actually the number of CV you would not believe who comes back after having spent 5 or 6 years at university and working for a bank, and decided at 28 or 30 years old that they didn't want to do this no more because they don't enjoy it, and they want to come back from the beginning and being a pastry chef.
Wow.
And you say, well, that's not something which was happening 28 years ago. This is something which is now happening because people realize they want to do something they love.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not always possible. Economically, it's a big jump to come from working in a bank to starting at the bottom of the ranks in a pastry world. But it is there. So, and all of them have been saying to me the biggest regret, not having followed their heart, but follow what they were due to do as opposed to what they wanted to do.
Yeah. No, I'd never thought about it that way. That you can get somebody at that stage of their career who's basically wants to start again because the path that they've chosen is not the path that they actually want.
Yeah, and it's never too late to realize that. But obviously, the longer you wait, the harder the jump.
Yeah.
Because obviously, I remember somebody working in a bank with a salary of £60,000 a year, having to leave that to the side and then start back at the very lower level in a job, which is not badly paid, but still, you got to halve that. And also you have to work the weekends and suddenly the evening. So the lifestyle has to change as well. Yeah. So when you are young, you invest your time developing your skills, making sure you are a good all-rounder and you get as strong as you can. Then suddenly the salaries are way, way, way better than you could expect. And they are certainly as competitive as you would have perhaps in a bank or anywhere else like that.
For sure.
So that's the attractive way. But you need to prepare yourself and decide from the beginning this is something you want to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's not an overnight success for sure. You've got to put the graft in.
But like anything, I suppose those who went to university invest a lot of effort, a lot of money, but hopefully it's for something they want to do for life.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's an expensive game.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Back to your story.
Yep.
What happened next? Where did we get to?
We were at the apprenticeship, I guess, yeah?
Yeah.
So I did 2 years apprenticeship as a baker first, and then I followed it by another 2 years as a pastry chef. Because ultimately, I wanted to be a pastry chef. It's something, I love sweets. There is that little biscuit who kind of played with my mind from where I was very, very, very young. It's called the Financier. And I always thought if I could do my own, I could eat as many as I can. And believe it or not, every single day I eat one.
Really? Right.
Which is not good for me, I have to say.
You actually look in good nick, though.
Yeah. But the little hazelnut Financier is part of a little biscuit range. And it's in a box and always going to be there.
Right.
It always remind me that there is certainly one of the reason I fall into the pot was one of those.
Yeah.
And my little guilty pleasure in some way. So I became a pastry chef. I always loved the intricacy of work. As a baker, you handle big volumes. It could be very repetitive, especially if you work in a shop. But as a pastry chef, there is always going to be a little bit of hard work, a little bit of finesse, and then the variety of things you have to do every day to get by makes it very interesting.
Yeah, and then the seasons as well, and the other thing you have to... Yeah.
And the produce you're working with. I mean, I was 16 years old. I never saw a vanilla pot in my life at the time.
Yeah.
Kiwis were the first fruit we kind of exotic fruit we were starting to see when I was young. You know
Right,
what I mean?
yeah.
It looks like now it's on every shelf of every supermarket, but the reality in those days in France, you were eating very seasonal food, which was great, but at the same time, you knew only what you could get around you. Now the world is very global and you can get anything and see everything, which in terms of a development point of view is very interesting. But as a pastry chef, I discovered my first vanilla pods, the difference between different varieties of chocolates, origin, and so on. And then you start to grow in not just making cakes or patisseries, you also start to build up your knowledge about ingredients, which is crucial because you're not mixing up two powders together to make a cake. You have to understand the chemical reaction, the flavor profile, the essence of flavors, and how it's going to work together to create a beautiful gâteau, patisserie, or dessert.
Yeah, and I suppose that's comes with experience as opposed to, I always look at the world of pastry as being quite almost alchemy because it's a real art form, but it feels like it's not something that you can have ideas in your head, but you can't fully form them just overnight. Like it's going to take time to get your head around what you need to make that the most spectacular version of whatever it is that you've come up with.
It's never achieved. That's the truth. And that's a dangerous game to a degree if you are a perfectionist like you can be, and I'm a little bit, unfortunately at times, because you're never happy with the result. You always try to push to find the best result. You sometimes find it. When you do, there you go. There is your classic dish. There is your classic patisserie that you will keep for the rest of your life. And it's achieved almost to perfection to your mind if it's never perfect. But it takes time and humility. You will get one thing from the first go straight to where it should be. It's called luck. That's nothing else. It's called luck because there is always something to work on to make it better. But sometimes you strike lucky and you've got the right direction. Actually, development or creation of a new dish is always the hardest thing because you need to find your inspiration. You need to know what's your story, what's your journey with this dish, what do you want to achieve, and what ultimately emotions you want to create when you are eating something. Because at the end of the day, flavors, textures, visuals create emotions, reaction. And that's what you want in our guest. Guest spends quite a bit of money when they come and eat with you here, definitely at the Manoir. You want to trigger in themselves something they didn't think was possible. So there you go. So it could be, and emotions come from different places as far as eating food. It could be a very simply made bake like the Petit Financier, and yet ensure that you've got the best pleasure with the flavor, the butterness, and the nuttiness of the smell and the flavors, as I said before. So it's just about getting it right. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I'm a wannabe chef in my own kitchen, but when it comes to matters of pastry, I can't do it. I just I leave that to the wife. She loves doing all that stuff because it's kind of, it's measured, whereas I'm a kind of on the fly recipe kind of a guy when it comes to cooking, and that doesn't really work in the world of patisserie.
And cooking at home, as I just realized through the lockdown, is not the easiest thing to do. And actually, patisserie in particular, or dessert or baking, whatever you call it, is the hardest thing to do because cooking, you can always get by. You got the ingredients. You can get by very quickly. You cook the steaks, you add the potato, you kind of work around. Patisserie, you have to combine together a specific amount of ingredients and the right ingredients as well. Otherwise, you ultimately change totally the result. And I did find out very hard because when I got locked away in my kitchen at home, I realized I didn't have the right ingredients. I didn't have the right equipment. Right. I didn't have the right recipe with me. And suddenly, you thought you were good until you start baking in your own kitchen. Right. Then you realize, okay, now you get tested. So humble a few months for me when I had to kind of reapproach my work. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it because it was kind of a new discovery for me. Changing the way you work, adapt to different conditions. and make it work still.
Yeah,
and challenging.
I think that's encouraging for us all as well to hear a world-class pastry chef say that they struggled in their own kitchen. That's I'll take that to the bank.
Well, don't get me wrong, I managed to get some success as well.
Yeah,
but
of course.
It is true. You have to be humble around your work. You know, it's a journey which will never stop learning.
Yeah.
You know, even a recipe you think you've mastered with the back of your hand and so on. Change your environment and suddenly things will change also with it. So you have to really adapt and understand where it comes from. And I find that very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Back to the story. We haven't even got into your 20s yet.
No. Well, just about, thereabout. So I done my 2 years apprenticeship as a pastry chef. And then I went on to work for a year in Paris. Because when you finish 4 years apprenticeship, then you become what we call a qualified ouvrier, you know, a chef.
Right.
It's simple, but in France, you got the ouvrier word for that. And you start at the very bottom, what I would say is a commis in today's world. A very classical pastry shop, Rue Monge, with a very old pastry chef stuck in his own ways. But the good thing there, I've learned very, very, very classical thing, such as making your own praliné, peeling up your own almonds, making your own almond paste and marzipan and things like that. Things you will not do in a pastry shop, you still don't do anymore, right? Because you buy those produce already made from very reliable companies, and they are actually stunning produce. But for me, being able to do it from scratch and seeing the old-fashioned way of where our job started helped me to understand how it gets made and appreciate what works and what doesn't work and what you're looking for in one of those produce when you get to buy one. Yeah. So it was very interesting. The only downside to that time, it wasn't the most enjoyable for me because we had a clash of generation. The gentleman was about to retire. He was just past the date in terms of retirement, and he was a little bit grumpy. And he had to work with youngsters. We were all fired up and wanted a little bit of newness and new recipes, and he wasn't having it. So I did a year. And then I did my military service because in France, in those years, you were doing a year military service in the Navy. And there I had the opportunity to work for the officers. And guess what? I was a pastry chef.
No way.
Say, pastry chef, we got a spot for you. You're going to make cakes for us. And I did. The good thing with that is I never stood still. I said, okay, I'm going to do this for you, but I want you to give me, because you didn't have any 2 days off every week. And when you were doing your military service, you could be there for 3 months without a single day off.
Right. Yeah.
But what I negotiated, through my cakes and desserts is to have every Monday off to go to school and prepare the theory test of my master exam in pastry. So during that year, which most young French chefs or people who does the military service will think they are wasting their time, I was actually investing my time trying to do the theory side of my master exam.
Right.
So I did that for a year.
And using your contraband to get there.
And use my pastry contraband to sweeten the deal in some ways.
Good pun as well.
Yeah. And then when I came back to work, took on a job as an ouvrier again out of the army. And then I managed to do the practical side of my master exam. There where I was working in a little bakery with nobody to teach me much. So I had to go for pretty much every days off and holidays and found a pastry chefs which were very renowned in the region where I was working. And I was spending a lot of time with him, Monsieur Mess. And he taught me all the side of pastry I didn't know because I haven't been confronted yet completely with that master level of work. And luckily his son was following the right path to do the master exam. He went to school specifically and dedicated for that. So between him and his son, I kind of picked all the skills I needed. And 2 years later, I was a master pâtissier.
Right.
So it was fairly young because I was 22 years old at the time. But I did work in a bakery. I did work in a restaurant. That was my first attempt as working in restaurants as well. So I kind of became very aware of the extent of what my job could be. It wasn't just a little bakery in the middle of town or a big patisserie in the middle of Paris. It could be a hotel. It could be a restaurant. Suddenly I kind of realized where I wanted to go and work. And the restaurant hotel world was more of a favor to me because the shift pattern was more like my clock in some ways, where I prefer to work in the evening than very early in the morning, and that's always been the case. Plus, working in hospitality, which is a restaurant and hotel in particular, give you the opportunity to meet so many other people. But when you work in a pastry shop or in a bakery, you only see your colleague.
Right, yeah.
And then you get there, it's dark, you leave, you go to bed, you see no one.
Right.
You know, when you work in hospitality industry, you see so many people from different origins, from different skill set, from different experience. There's so much to learn from people you're working with, other than just what you're doing as well. Yeah. And made it so much more interesting for me. So that's why I started to decide, that's why I decided to stick to this side of the world of cooking. And I went to work at the Normandy Hotel in Deauville for my first position as a pastry chef in a restaurant. Where I was by myself doing bread and all the dessert, and again developing my skill in suddenly not making patisseries or baking anymore, but I had to transfer these skills into a plated dessert where obviously textures, flavor profile, and emotion side of it is completely different than when you got into a cake. Yeah. Because there in a cake, something needs to last for a few hours, when in a dessert, it will be gone within 10 minutes. So you're pushing the boundaries, and you can work with different kind of textures and more fragile and lighter flavors. So very interestingly there. Then from there, I did a year and a half there, and then I got the greatest opportunity of my life, which was to go and work at the Ritz Hotel in Paris. Right. The first original Ritz Hotel. I know there is one in London as well, which has also been created by Césaris, but the first one was the one in Place Vendôme. And I had two places in the world I wanted to work. One was the Ritz in Paris, and one was Hôtel de Monaco in Monaco. Hôtel de Paris in Monaco. Right. And both reasons was because I wanted to work with Meilleur Ouvrier de France. Meilleur Ouvrier de France is the equivalent we've got here is the MCAs, Master of Culinary Art, which happen every 4 years. And in France, those guys are the best craftsmen in their field, in France and ultimately in the world. And at the Ritz in Paris and at the Hôtel de Paris in Monaco, you had some of those guys in bakery, in patisserie, in kitchens. They were everywhere. So those big kitchens had the means to employ the best people. And I wanted to work with one of them to see how it felt like. Yeah. You know, and also learn from the best. Because all my career I've learned through good people, but had to work hard to try to find that knowledge and that skill to better myself with it. There you could work with those guys, embed yourself in it, and then completely submerge yourself in that world of perfection. Yeah. And try to be the best you could. So I got a position after waiting for 6 months. I had to wait 6 months for a position to become available there. And I was like 22 or 23 years old as a chef de partie. I was chef de partie and I'd never worked in the kitchen. But then I hold my ground, 23 years old, and I worked there for almost 4 years and I ended up as a sous chef, number 2 in a pastry kitchen. And we were 85 in the kitchen, believe it or not. And 5 of those guys were Meilleur Ouvrier de France, 1 in bakery, 4 in kitchen. Right. My head chef pâtissier did the final of the MOF twice, but never got to, unfortunately, the title, because it's something you don't get given. You have to work very hard, and there is a little bit of luck as well on the day. You have to deliver on the day, and it's a very, very, very tough awards to get. But when you get it, it's the ultimate reward in France for sure. Yeah. But worked 4 years there, almost 4 years, and then the phone rang. It was Raymond Blanc, looking for a pastry chef. So at the time, I was kind of looking to leave the Ritz, though I had a great position. I was well looked after, and I was continuing to grow. But after 4 years, I wanted to travel the world. I was 27 years old. I've dedicated pretty much all my career to my work. My wife, who just got married, said to Raymond Blanc one day, Benoit is married with his work, then with me. I believe me when I say it's not true. I'm married with my wife first. Yeah. But she thought I was, because I was completely invested myself to grow. Yeah. I wanted to make myself as strong as possible. So we wanted to travel potentially to go to nice places, having consolidate your CV in some ways at the Ritz in Paris. But the UK was at the very bottom of the list. promise you. I
Well,
love you guys to
don't doubt it.
bits.
I don't doubt it at that time.
But at the time, I wanted to travel perhaps to places exotic or to America to try to get, the big buck and then eventually have a different lifestyle.
Yeah.
But Raymond Blanc was the first one to call, and I came to see him. It took me about 4 months to make my mind up. He was a very persuasive man, I have to say. He was trying. And I wasn't committing. I was not quite ready. And eventually, in January 1995, I joined the team. And I said to him, if I'm here 6 months, I'll be there 2 years. Yeah?
Yeah.
There was a lot to be done to set it to the standard, though the Pastry Section was a great one. But Le Manoir was in the transition phase of extension and rebuilding, and the Pastry Kitchen had the temporary head chefs for the past couple of years, made it a little bit difficult to ground a team that could progress. So my job was to kind of set this one down and reinstall some good foundations, which they had before, but they've lost for a couple of years. And 6 months grew in 2 years, and 2 years grew in 28 years. I love working here. Yes, there are better days than others, like everybody.
Yeah,
but you appreciate. It makes you appreciate the good days better when you have a slightly less ones. You know what I mean? And but there is not one day the same, and that's the truth. That's the reality. This place is never standing still. There is always that quest for perfection, as Raymond Blanc will say.
Yeah.
And every HOD which has been there long enough understands that and is fully behind it and committed to it.
Yeah. What I really love about your journey to this point is, what you talked about earlier in our conversation around set your sights high, and maybe you'll land there, maybe you won't, maybe you'll land a little bit below that. But if you set your sights high, you don't know what you're going to be able to achieve until you do that. And your story is a kind of living proof of that. You set your sights. I wanted to go and work at the Ritz in Paris. Nailed that, got that. It was hard work, no doubt, I'm sure. And probably your learning curve was extreme at times. But you keep setting this dedicated sights on being the best you can possibly be. And even when you were talking about even like your time off was spent going to learn.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that I think it's a message that I think is massively important. If you really, really want to make it in anything, whether it's hospitality or anywhere, you've got to have that level of dedication, I think. I think you're very, very lucky if you get to a position of success quickly and, luckily. Maybe Instagram influencers can do it in 10 days or whatever. But when it comes to learning your craft, especially when it comes to that, and I don't mind blowing smoke up your backside as well. My wife and I have eaten here before, and my wife is quite particular when it comes to desserts.
Yep.
She doesn't like over sweet, likes balance. She said, make sure you remember to tell Benoit that it's the best desserts that we've ever had anywhere.
Well, she has to come back.
Yeah, so there we are. So,
well, thank you for that.
Yeah. But I really, really love that. And I also love the fact that, you would have joined here at a time where the food scene in the UK probably wasn't that great. It
was the beginning, I would guess.
Yeah.
But it is true. I remember going out.
That's a hell of a leap of faith. Hell of a leap of faith.
Going out around Oxford, I remember that tourne-d'eau Rossini, which was a disaster in a restaurant. I say, oh God, this is what we're eating. And in fact, the best food you could find was in pubs, gastropub, cooking honest English food,
Right.
And that was lovely. But anything being tried to being fancy a little bit, it was a disaster. We grew from that. The UK now is, even comparing to France, when I go to France, sometimes some restaurants are really, really average for the money you pay. When here in the UK, you've got, you had to before, cost of living and all that.
Yeah.
Really good value for money, and the cooking skills was brilliant because they were trying to be good at what they were doing. When in France, they're a bit complacent at times. You say, that's going to be fine, And I thought the service and the quality of food in general in France, not everywhere, of course, but mainstream has gone down when in the UK went up.
Yeah.
So, but what I wanted to say earlier on about the career and perhaps a message for young lads is invest. Don't see it like dedication. Yeah, dedication. But you think, it's a whole lot of hard work. But if you love what you do, it's not as hard as that.
Yeah.
Because You have a Sunday or you have a Monday off, bam, you're going to go on and pull sugar work and do some lovely sugar roses and do a sugar sculpture or chocolate or whatever. It's fun if you love what you're doing.
Yeah.
But it's also work. But it's an investment. You are investing in yourself. So there's nothing wrong there.
Yeah.
There's absolutely wrong. Now, if you rather invest in going to the movie or going out and play your PlayStation or your game console or like my son online movie games and so on, it's your call. But ultimately, are you bettering yourself in your own development there or just having fun? And having fun is important, but let's not forget, fun will not always give you a career prospect. And the last little bit of advice I would say, for me, it was all about what is my career going to look like when I'm 40 years old? And I was perhaps a boring little view, and most youngsters don't know what they want to do in life, and the most interesting people are certainly don't know what they want to be in life, but it gives you an idea of where you want to sit with your family.
Yeah.
Would you have a family? Would you want a family? When I was young, I always thought, I'll have one. And then how do you care and how do you look after a family? Well, you need to give your best chance, your best shot and your best chances behind you to make sure you're as strong and as skilled as possible to get there. For me, there was no doubt I'll be a pastry chef anyway. So I said, there we go. Invest most of my time in bettering myself. And one day at 27 years old, when I came to the Manoir, then I had the skill set necessary to do the job and be there. The problem we have today's world, when there is a skill shortage, perhaps in our industry, is you get some people in the industry who get brought up in a most superior position that they're actually skilled for. And that's the downside to that, because then they reach their limit far too quickly.
Yeah.
So I would say, guys, invest in your development, invest in your progression, make sure it's something you love doing, and look at yourself in the future. How strong do you want to be? And where do you want to be, potentially? And that's maybe a question too far. And many struggle to answer that, but because you never kind of thought about it.
Yeah.
You know, and that helps you to give yourself a path towards success.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would just add to that as well, that like consolidate your learning. Like you don't need to be in a rush to get from CDP to sous chef as an example. You know, make sure you take all of the learning you can while you're at that level so that you're better prepared for the next level.
Yeah.
If you make too quick progress, you can sometimes find yourself out your depth very quickly, and that's a different problem then at that point. But
yeah, ultimately, it's very good. I think our industry is a generous one. There's been some reset button being pressed in the past 2 or 3 years, which make it less hard than it used to be. I mean, now people are paid for every hour they work. You should say it should be, but it hasn't been always the case. We talk about long hours. Yes, they are still longer than others, but not as bad as they were.
Yeah.
You know, to give you an example, in a pastry at Le Manoir, we work 48, 50 hours a week, while we used to do 70, 80.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is still a lot more done than perhaps if somebody works 35 or 40 hours. That's a fact. But in our industry, it's a lot less than it used to be, and you can have a work-life balance around it, which is important. And you still meet everybody. Plus, you can travel with it. Let's not forget, though we live in a world of traveling restriction with COVID, coming out of COVID a little bit, but you could live anywhere in the world with that job.
Yeah.
Or any of those jobs, because
you'll never be able to work.
Anywhere in the world, you will have a restaurant or a hotel or a shop which will need your skills. So it gives you an opportunity to live differently. I suppose that if you go into a bank, potentially you may have a good quality of life, fair enough, but you will stick to pretty much where you are, potentially. With our work, you might not be academically driven, though I will always encourage youngsters, don't think it's a job for the people who can't read and write only. You can be smart, and the smarter you are, the more successful you can be. But obviously, without too much academic behind you, you can look at the world as your oyster and a place you can work with and meet so many great people. And you meet great people, famous people. And eventually, if you're a bit lucky, you can do a bit of TV as well.
Wow. Nice segue there.
There you go.
So how did that come about? Because you know what we were talking about earlier on as well, around the fact that the world of pastry has really been put on the map. First of all, in a kind of amateur sense with Bake Off, and then Bake Off Professionals came along, and frankly, it's a compelling watch.
Mm.
It's actually one of the most stressful TV shows I've ever watched in my life, especially when they're moving the showpieces and the like. But how did that come about for you?
Well, before the TV, what's important is the world of competitions. I mean, that's one thing we haven't discussed yet, is obviously throughout that journey of bettering yourself, perfecting your skills and growing into your job role, competition is also a very big tool to that.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, there is a World Cup of pastry.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not just football or rugby. There is also a World Cup of pastry. It's called La Coupe du Monde de la Pâtisserie. It has to be a French name because it's held in France. But the reality is the Pastry World Cup, and it's held in Lyon every 2 years. And I've been involved since 2011 in helping to set a team there one way or another. And we've had a UK representation there since then. The first time in 2011, we had only 3 months to come up with a team and make it work. And we came within the best 10 teams in the world, considering you've got like 25 teams to begin with. And that was with no money, no training, no nothing. We put 2 guys together, another one on top, and then off you go, try your best with what you got.
Yeah.
So that gave us a lot of hope and encouragement to carry on. And every 2 years we grew up throughout the ranks. And the last one, we finished 4th, just the wrong place to be, just off the podium. But considering the UK pastry world is 4th in the world, would you think that when you look around you? Well, it's definitely something we help or we contributed to grow in this country. Plus, I've done the Master of Culinary Art in 2005, and I had 3 of my sous chefs who have actually won it since. And I encourage all my youngsters to take part of all different likes of competition, Young Pastry Chef of the Year and different things like that, in order for them also to embrace that culture of bettering yourself through your own work and your time off, but also through competition. One day those guys, they look behind and they say, well, I'm completely above everybody else because I've done those little extras. But then throughout that world of competition, which I've seriously encouraged through my time here at Le Manoir and in the UK, eventually a phone call came about. And through that World Cup of pastry and the guys starting to Google a little bit and see what was happening at the world stage and what was achieved, a production company decided to perhaps try to put a competition, but a television competition.
Right.
As such, which could be a teamwork competition, which never happened before. Most competition on TV or much program on TV about single person.
Yeah, sure.
So as a teamwork, we started with a team of three people, like you would have it for the World Cup, and they had to find judges to be able to be knowledgeable enough to a degree, and potentially going well on TV as well, or not being scared of the camera and things like that. And they were starting to interview people, and actually I wasn't called to begin with. I have to say, no, I wasn't. So
I don't know how to think about that.
I don't blow my own trumpets on this. Yeah. Actually, Cherish and I got among the last one to be interviewed.
Really?
Casted for it.
Right. See, in my head, I was like, right, we need to go and get him, and we need to go and get her, and that's it.
But the thing is, what really warmed my heart is the whole casting process. I've heard about it going on, and I said, you know what, well done, good for them. And lasted about 4 or 5 months. And 3 or 4 months into it, we got the phone call. And I said, well, I know you guys have been casting for a little while. Why are you calling me now? I mean, is there a reason? They said, well, we ask every single people they've interviewed and casted who they think we should also interview to be with them. And your name was mentioned pretty much all the time. So eventually they said, well, we have to call you. And we did. So I came down and we got through a selection process of different judges. And so was Cherish as well. So I knew Cherish from before in the industry. We never met a lot, but I knew we went to pastry events on several occasions. So I knew of her and we get on very well. But the difference then, I think we've got picked from is because out of everybody, we might have been genuine in our feedback and willing to kind of, though we're very hard, as you can expect and as you would have seen, we were also trying to kind of make sure there was a positive outcome somewhere, somehow, or at least for the chefs down the line, and also trying to find the best of the candidate we could find. And eventually we got to be first 3 judges, and then eventually down to 2. And we are about to film the 8th series next year.
God,
yeah, there you go.
God, the time flies.
So, yeah. But it's exciting time. Every year I feel excited about the idea of going back and meet new chefs, meet new challenges as well with the chefs, because obviously Cherish and I are designing those challenges, but you never know how the team are going to react to it, and sometimes looks great and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
That's sometimes we think we fail them. Have we asked for something which is looking that difficult? But then 1 or 2 teams manages it, so that means it's achievable.
But it's a challenge, right? You've got to set a challenge,
and that's
be easy.
It's the same thing. If they apply the same process, i.e., invest in your development and invest in your practice, for that matter, then you come to the challenge time and you will not fail dramatically. Yeah. You will be there or thereabout. And often enough, especially through the first rounds, the teams haven't prepared well enough, and therefore they find it harder than they thought it would be.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
No, I mean, I think you guys get the balance right of kind of being... I mean, you're like mum and dad, basically. You know, it's like we're going to push you, and we're going to be pretty tough on the feedback, but equally, we're going to encourage you. We want you to bring out the best of yourself for this competition. And I suppose there's also this element of anybody who gets into that competition, there's going to be nerves to start with as well, as they get settled into the format and all of that as well. And once they've riddled that out, then you hopefully get the best of them, and that's the moment that they shine. No,
definitely. I mean, some are usually pretty nervous, especially the first day. The first day is a reality check for them, because they know they've got 3.5 hours to do a challenge, but time flies. But there are 2 of them, so technically they've got 7 hours, yeah? But if they go a little too light on their feet for the first half an hour, those 30 minutes they won't have back.
Yeah.
And I always say to them, off camera, because you don't always see through the editing how nice we are actually with the team. Yeah.
I quite believe it.
I kind of make a point to gather them all in the middle of the kitchen, and that's my first thing today. The first minute is the one you will never get back, so do not waste it.
Yeah.
We're spinning around or looking for a pan, or believe it or not, some even have a cup of tea. They make sure the first minute is spent making sure there is hot water in their teapot and then having a cup of tea. When Cherish and I see things like that, we're boiling like the kettle. We could pour flipping tea for them, for sure, because there is just enough time to do a good job. There is enough time to do a great job. And there is just enough time, if a little something goes wrong, to do a good job still.
Yeah.
Everything after that becomes complicated.
Yeah.
And that's what we make sure, guys, when we do the auditions in October of all the teams, regardless if they're going to get picked or not, I say to them, guys, start practicing now. Regardless if you are picked or not, start practicing now. Every area you are weak for, start practicing now. Because if you are picked, and when you are picked, that skill will help you to do work on the development of the recipe we ask you to do. Yeah. And it'll be, if you haven't, and wait only to find out, it's a wasted opportunity to better yourself again.
Yeah, you might never be here again. Might never get the opportunity again. Yeah.
Yeah, and then, you try to surf the wave when they are motivated as well. But some do understand it, some don't. There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. So many questions I want to ask you, but I am very conscious of time, and that you have probably 13 plus pans on the go in the kitchen at the moment. But I'm going to come back to the story, as it were. Not something I always love to ask everyone that comes on the show is, do you have any funny stories from your career so far? I'm sure many, but stuff that's repeatable on air. I do remember, because you very kindly did fill out the form for me before, there was one around bagpipe music.
Oh, yes.
Which really, as you can hear from the accent, has sparked an interest.
Yes. So I work usually for Christmas, or I have been for the past few years. And there is a little tradition. I mean, usually at work we don't play music because everybody's 100% focused. It's a little bit of a Formula One team. You're there to perform. We talk to each other, but music is a distraction. We need to focus on what we do, and stay strong there. Except on Christmas Day.
Okay.
On Christmas Day, turn the music on, and it's bagpipe morning with all the Bagpipes, Scottish Bagpipe songs and on and on. And usually I played before the service starts for about a couple of hours, quite loud.
A couple of hours?
Yeah, a couple of hours.
God, I'm not sure I could deal with that.
I find half of the team cope with it quite well.
Yeah.
And the other half
want to kill you.
Struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
I used to do that when I first joined Le Manoir many years ago. We used to have the DVD players, and there was a hi-fi in the chefs in the kitchen's office, and we used to play a DVD. And there was a bagpipe special Christmas, and it was going through the whole kitchen, not just the pastry, through the whole kitchen.
Right.
And then I find that CD later on scratched completely with knives and so on to make sure it wasn't working. But now those days, there's no DVDs or CDs anymore. You can play it on Wi-Fi. So obviously, it's on for 2 hours. And I'm always gonna remember my little Frenchman, a young commie I had, and he was the quietest I've ever seen him. He was quiet naturally, but this time he was like in a corner of the kitchen, not moving. He couldn't take it. He was having a little tear in the corner of his eye. And it was just like, but said nothing. So eventually after 2 hours, we realized that he was completely frustrated beyond anything because he couldn't take the noise the bagpipe makes. But it always been part of our funny story. We laughed about it when knowing about it. He couldn't take it. But everybody knows now, Christmas Day morning, there is at least a good hour, a solid hour of not Christmas music, but bagpipe music, which I always find.
Yeah.
Nice.
That reminds me of, have you ever watched that SAS program on Channel 4?
No.
It's another reality TV show, but
Okay.
One of the challenges that they get them to do is they put them in stress positions and they put thrash metal through. I think a bagpipes for 2 hours would do the same to me.
Yeah. It would. I completely get it, but it's part of our tradition.
Yeah.
You know, in the Manoir
Traditions
kitchen,
must live.
in a pastry kitchen, at least Christmas Day, there are going to be some bagpipe. Get used to it.
Yeah. Fantastic.
But that's it.
Great stuff. Well, I mean, as I said, I'm sure there's many more things that we could talk about. I'd massively appreciate you coming on the show and telling your story, and keep flying the flag, because I think you definitely emit positivity for this industry, and we need that everywhere. And it's just great to get time with people like you who just live and breathe this industry. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time, and good luck to everybody.
Good man. Take care.
Thank you.
And there we have it. It was wonderful to get some time with Benoit, and what a story he has. I hope you enjoyed this dessert to finish off your digital Le Manoir meal this week, and what a way to bring the curtain down on Season 3. But you won't have to wait long, as I'll be back in April with more fun and shenanigans from the wonderful world of hospitality, as well as a few new things for you to enjoy. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you then.